Namaskar, I am Dr. Rama Paurel. Welcome to 7th episode of SciPod, the conversation on science, policy and development issues. Every global issue such as climate change, loss of biodiversity and food security have science component. Being global in character, there needs involvement of scientific communities working in collaboration, thus needs involvement of national and international organizations. However, countries are not
ग्लोबल आइएमए बैंक सबैका लागि बैंक
making enough progress in meeting the demands of this global crisis. The Hindu Kush Himalaya mountain range span 8 countries and are vital for food, water, and power security for up to 2 billion people and one of the biodiversity hub in the world. ICIMOD is working in this region for more than 40 years. In this episode, we will be discussing on the need for regional collaboration on climate change, food security, and biodiversity issues in Himalayan region with insights from the work of ICIMOD. For this, we have Ms. Isabella Kajal. Isabella Kajal has served as Deputy Director General of ICIMOD. She has worked in multiple leadership and management positions in various international organizations, working in interconnected risks presented by climate, environment, biodiversity, and development for more than 30 years. Welcome in SciPod, ma'am.
Namaste, thank you.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good today.
I saw you were working in international organization for climate change, biodiversity, and all these issues for more than 30 years. How do you describe your journey?
So my journey started in dryland Tanzania, that is in East Africa, where I worked with agriculturalists and herders and farmers in a very challenging and harsh environment. So I spent 4 years there working to find more sustainable solutions for the farmers. It was very difficult. It was also difficult and a difficult environment for a woman. I think I was the first professional woman serving that organization at the time. So it wasn't easy, but after my period there, I realized that actually we need to do more to research into more effective solutions. So I moved to a think tank in London called IIED, and I spent several years there looking and finding solutions, particularly around biodiversity and how can we balance biodiversity conservation and sustainable use with development and sustainable livelihoods. So after several years there, I moved to the UK government. I was keen to go back into implementation after having spent several years looking and researching into issues. So I moved to Kenya, where I ran a governance program, actually natural resource governance program, and it was the first time actually that the UK had come back into Kenya to work on issues around forests and natural resources. And I spent several years there as well, working with the government, working with various NGOs to ensure that we have a more enabling environment at policy and legislative levels on forestry and environment. And then through my time at UK, I moved through various positions, including international policy. So I was the UK lead for the Biodiversity Convention on Development, as well as the Desertification Convention. I then moved to research, and I set up and ran several large research for development programs at DFID. And then finally, I moved to run the Asia Regional Program out of Delhi, the climate program, which brought me to this region. And I haven't left this region since.
Okay.
So I've been 12 years here, from moving from Delhi then to Colombo, where I worked for the International Water Management Institute on a global program on how to better balance agriculture and water and environment issues. And then from there, I came to ICIMOD.
Oh, yeah, it seems like you started your good journey from developed countries to Africa, even, and you are working in this Asian region, especially in South Asia, and now in Himalayan region for quite a bit of years. You are also the first female Deputy Director General of ICIMOD. And if I look at even in this talk, I just focus on how could we develop the female leadership, and how do you think, like, what could we do to bring, still there are very few female leaders in international organization, multilateral, bilateral, and regional organization. What could we do to increase the female leadership in those organizations?
Yeah, very good question. So, I mean, there's several things we need to do. I think the first issue is to really advocate the need for a balance between men and women in leadership positions, because women bring different kinds of skills to leadership to men, but it's really the blend of both that really deliver and make greater success. So I think selling that and advocating for that you need that balance between male and female, because women tend to be able to multitask better. Perhaps there's a little bit more compassion there. Women will think differently, which we blend that with men, then you can get better innovations. So really trying to look at the positive side and what success means to have an equal balance between men and women. I think that's really important, so that reassurance is there, that delivery is improved with the right kind of blend. The other area is education. So we really need women to be working and building their skills and capacities once they leave their masters or their university, really getting those leadership skills. They don't just come naturally. Mentoring is really important, building that confidence, ensuring that women have a voice. So that's very important as well. And of course, not to mention that we need more women doing STEM subjects as well, and making sure that there's as many women as men completing their education, which I think now in Europe is okay, but I think in this region there's still a way to go there. Other elements, I mean, ensuring that women have some sort of childcare arrangements. Not everyone has an extended family. Some countries it's very expensive to have childcare. So really providing that. Of course, here we have a creche. So we provide a creche here at ICIMOD, which is really important so that women can pursue their career. But perhaps a personal message, it's to never give up. And it's not easy, but it is essentially perseverance and believing in yourself. And that doesn't come that easily either. So I think when I started, I was quite unconfident, and I had to really go step by step to boost and build my confidence in myself that I could be a leader. But I was also quite driven, and I set myself a goal and I pursued that goal. I didn't give up. Even if life does push you off track sometimes, but you've got to then get yourself back on track. So it's not easy, but I think it's really important to persevere and set yourself that goal and believe in yourself that you can do it. But also, as you're moving on that journey, to solicit support from as many people as you can get. So pick the people that you believe in or aspire to be, and seek their advice and seek their support, because that's also really important, because it helps you understand what you need to do.
It's kind of positive these days. Even in Nepal, I see many female leaders in international organizations are working, and they are also mentoring the local communities and local female leaders, and that is creating a positive environment. And I really like how these are setting some examples here in Nepal and in this region. So coming back to our main issues of this talk, you have experience globally from Europe to Africa to Himalayan region, but let's focus on Himalayan region this time. Why do we need to have a regional organization, regional collaboration to work in this Hindu Kush Himalayan region?
So this is a really extraordinary region. If you look at what this region what this region houses, it's the third largest ice mass after the Arctic and the Antarctic. We have the highest peaks. We have extraordinary cultural and biological diversity. So really this region is home to the most extraordinary natural and cultural wealth. But also by its very nature, it's also fragile and vulnerable to climate change, changing temperatures, biodiversity loss, and of course the demographic change that's happening in this region. And as you mentioned earlier, 10 of Asia's major rivers emanate from this region, upon which 2 billion people depend for energy, for water, for food security. But also, of course, what comes from this region is too much water. So we have also the devastating effects of water, which of course we saw at the end of September in the events that hit Kathmandu. So in terms of why it's important to really focus on this region, so the scientists are telling us that this region is warming 2 times faster than the global average. So there is this phenomenon called elevation-dependent warming. So you get slightly higher and faster rises in temperature at higher altitudes. So that's extremely concerning. And other projections are that as a result of this warming, we're going to have quite dramatic changes in the ice and the permafrost. So at 2 degrees, we'll only have 50% of our ice left by 2100, which feels quite remote. Yeah. But when you think about it, the implications are huge in terms of what that might mean, in terms of what it does to the vegetation, what it does to the water sources. And the issue is that sometimes, even I have only realized this recently, once the ice is gone, it is not coming back. Yeah. So it won't come back. So once we've lost it, we've lost it.
It's already clear that this region is in crisis, the climate crisis, the biodiversity loss. Why and what should the global community need to hear from this region?
So the global community needs to understand that when our ice melts, firstly, that ice, that water that emanates from the ice will go to the oceans. Mm-hmm. So coupled with our ice melting, also the poles melting, it will have dramatic impact on the oceans, whether that's ocean circulation, which actually drives weather and climate in a different way. So it also will impact on sea life as well, and it will reduce the salinity of the water. So these are huge global impacts. So we will have completely different climates.
It's not only the regional issue, it's a kind of global issue that everybody need to be concerned about. Even like the highest peak of the world, it's only like the Mount Everest is the highest. If we lost the ice mass, then it affects the global community, right? So like what are the other major challenges that the government in this region need to work in collaboration?
Yeah, so just one other element of the global impact is when the climate and the environment and landscape changes here, where will people go? already we see huge outmigration. I came down yesterday from an area in South Langtang National Park, and already that whole area, all the terraces are abandoned. People have left. I was told people have left because the temperatures are going up too much and it's much drier, but also they're really concerned about the increasing incidence of landslides, so they don't feel safe. So a lot of these you can draw into the changing climate and changing biodiversity. So the question is, where will those people go? And of course, if you have sea level rise, where will those people go? So you've got a huge, again, global concern around migration, because those people will have to go somewhere. And that's, to me, those two elements, the changing oceans, the migration, where are people going to go? What are we going to do? We don't have answers to that yet. But in terms of what can governments in this region do, so in terms of what ICIMOD believes it needs to support on, so we believe we need to support the governments who are obviously the owners, the governing board of ICIMOD, is that we need to work alongside governments to help identify what solutions work at local level. Now, we're not an implementing agency, but we need to be demonstrating different ways of doing things. So, for instance, some examples of what we've been working on is climate resilient agriculture. How do you manage pests and diseases, which of course are changing as well with changing temperatures and rainfall patterns. Community-based early warning systems, so we've been working on those kinds of issues. We've been looking recently at nature-based solutions and how can, for instance, we reduce the risk of disasters and landslides through more effective use of nature and management of landscapes. We also have been working at higher altitude. We know that the pastures are changing. As the ice recedes and as temperatures rise, the quality of the pasture is not as good. So we're looking at alternative fodders for the yak and the herders up at higher altitudes. So what we try to do is look at what are the potential solutions, and we try to do that working with our government partners to help then identify what works so that the governments can then move on and implement those solutions. And we also are looking at policies and how we can provide the right kind of evidence for policy change. Again, it's difficult, but take, for example, air quality. So we're working a lot more now on.
So are there any policies that actually like ICIMOD facilitate or like to have implemented in the regional scale in Himalayan region that helps to mitigate some of these global emerging crises like climate change?
Yeah.
Do you have any?
So it's always hard in terms of attribution of what ICIMOD has actually tangibly supported, but we've done some work on the rangelands policy in Bhutan. Again, it was not us drafting the policy, but we provided technical inputs. So in terms of some of the work on brick kilns in the valley, we provided demonstrations, and I believe that at a lower level in terms of the brick kiln associations, there have been some changes in terms of how you construct kilns so that they're more energy efficient. So there's several examples like that, but in terms of delivering something at that regional scale, so at the moment we're working on a process, what we call science to policy dialogues. So we've been looking at that in the context of air and also cryosphere, and those have been our two first areas we've started to work on. So we facilitated 2 dialogues now in the countries of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, looking at what is the science on air quality, what are the impacts, and what does this mean for policy? And because we know that no single country alone can tackle or resolve air quality, all countries need to work together to resolve that. So again, it's a step-by-step process at the regional level. So we have a Kathmandu roadmap now. I think we have a Bhutan plan from the last meeting, and we're aiming to establish a kind of working group for all those countries that could bring specialists together to determine and agree what needs to happen to really improve air quality. We've also been looking at how we could have some form of a regional mechanism, which we were aiming that our high-level representatives from the region could sit together on some sort of a high-level dialogue. So looking at forums such as the Arctic Council or the Alpine Convention, and how could we develop something that's suitable for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region that would bring all the countries together. So this is a process we've been working on for the last probably 4 years, and we're continuing to work on so that we can agree some sort of a mechanism for the region, whether that's a forum, some sort of high-level forum that can work across the countries to work on these most critical transboundary issues, because most of the Hindu Kush Himalaya has huge upstream and downstream effects, and most of the challenges are mobile. They move. The water moves. When the cryosphere melts, the water moves to other countries. Air moves. Wildlife moves. So we need to work together.
I saw EC mode also have its own plan, like a midterm strategic plan, and that also focus on mitigating the risks created by those challenges. So how could the government and this region be benefited by those plans, and how could they implement or utilize those resources, the knowledge they created by EC mode, in developing the policies? Even if we talk about the Nepal, we have 3 tiers of government. Every level of government can make their own policies. How would they utilize these global resources to have a local implementation to solve the problem on local level?
Yeah. So the nature of our work is always to work alongside government partners. So we do that already quite a lot. But in terms of how, so a lot of our work is also quite focused on specific areas. So we have work in the Lower Koshi. So there we're working with local government. And then also, I'm not going to say this correctly, Sundar Pashim province.
Sundar Pashim.
Yeah. So there we're also working with local government. But in terms of local governments that are not working with us at the moment, so we're always welcome any officials to approach us and seek our advice. We have 150 specialists in this organisation, and it is our role to provide advice on issues. Secondly, we are now rebuilding our website so that it's more easily accessible. At the moment, it's quite hard to find the data and the information that we hold. So over the next year, we're aiming to create something that's far more accessible to anyone, so that it's more easy to get the kind of information that they need.
We are losing our ice mass, we are losing our biodiversity, we are having every sector, we are impacting by the climate change, even though we have a very very few contribution to greenhouse gas emission. So how do you think about those international community here in this region, and how could organization like regional organization make our voices heard more loudly and in immediate ways?
Yeah. So yeah, there's much more that needs to be done to raise the voice of the Hindu Kush Himalaya and its communities. And we recognize that in our last strategy. And so we've put a lot of emphasis on visiting and attending the Conference of the Parties. So we have a team at the moment in Cali in Colombia at the UN Convention on Biodiversity, the COP16. So again, what we're doing there is working with our regional member countries to really raise the voice of mountain biodiversity. But it's not easy because there are so many different voices and needs globally. But we really have a very targeted strategy this year. We'll also be at COP29 in Baku, where again, we're supporting our regional member countries as much as we can with the evidence that they need in the negotiations to really raise the voice of what's happening to the cryosphere in the HKH, what are the impacts, what are the global impacts as well, because it's important to raise what the regional and national impacts are, but the global community also needs to understand what the global implications are, like we discussed earlier. And I think there's still a lack of awareness of that. But also we still need to do far more on the economics of what is actually happening. There's a lot of huge challenges. So take, for example, the September event. Yes. We're now saying it's about 1% of GDP that's been hit. Now, partly we know that that's changing intensity and unexpected rainfall at the end of the monsoon that really caused a lot of damage, but also we know that there's kind of a lot of challenges with planning and so on. But we do need to be very clear what can be attributed to climate change and what are the economics and economic losses of that. So we need to get the science right on what can be attributed to climate change, and then what did that cost the country or the community, and then who is actually going to pay for that? Yes. I mean, there's a huge moral and ethical challenges in that. And these are not going to be easy negotiations. And obviously I come from the north, so I understand that perspective, but I also have spent a lot of time in this region, so I understand the perspectives here. And somehow we need to find a better way of moving forwards. And to me, it's really about the evidence, and that's the good science, and then the good economics is going to be really important as we move forwards. And just even, we have to recognize that these international fora are very long run processes, and sometimes it's easy to get a little bit pessimistic and despondent about them. But they're important because they're seeking global consensus. So we really need to be very present there. And we need to be pushing also on finance flows. This is one of the most underinvested regions. But then alongside that, how can we encourage investment into this region? And that, there's a lot of national responsibility there as well. And then we also need to really push the mitigation agenda. I think I was at a meeting the other day and said, it's 1.1, 1.2 already. We're not far from 1.5. Yes. And I think that globally we're not, that realization hasn't come to us about what the impacts are going to be yet, apart from, of course, amongst those who work on these issues. But the need for decarbonisation quickly now is so critical. And sometimes we're not always communicating the quick fix solutions widely enough. So again, I was at a meeting a few weeks ago where they were saying actually methane, reduction of methane, so the short-lived climate forcer gases, could give us a huge win on reducing warming. But nobody's really focused on that. More people are focused on carbon dioxide. So there are solutions out there, but somehow they're not always getting into the fora will really make things happen, and that's not so easy.
As you mentioned, the science-based solution and investment and research on these issues, I think it's very critical. What would be your message as you are working in this region to the younger generation for their futures to work on these issues? Do you have any specific message to them?
So I think the younger generation really has to look to innovate and be creative, because my view is that the solutions that we've been working on for the last, or I've been working on for the last 20 or 30 years, they're not really fit for the future. Mm-hmm. So to me, the younger generations need to look to innovate and really use the power of innovation. And I think we can see signs of that amongst youth already, but the need for that is going to be huge. So again, society has to support the youth to do that, but also to be really aware of the huge challenges ahead for youth. But sometimes I feel it's not that youth should create all the solutions, because perhaps our generation and the one before and the before have created these
the problem. Yes.
So, in terms of we also have to act. It can't just be about the youth. So we really still have to also keep creating and providing that enabling environment for the young to innovate. But I also, sometimes when you listen to the science, you think, oh my goodness, it's pretty bad. But I think there's still hope. If we really start to act now, I think there's still a lot of potential to reverse the trends. And I think there's a lot of signs of that happening. Even when I look at my career, when I started, no one was talking about environment. No one talked about climate. It was like, oh, you're working on climate and environment? What's that? Mm-hmm. And now it's just such a mainstream area of work. So I think there are changes. Are they a bit later than we would have liked? Yes, but I think there is change, and there is still a lot of potential to create greener, more resilient pathways. And in a way, I think that's where the young have to really focus, because there could be potential either enterprise opportunities, that new enterprise opportunities that have a comparative advantage in the market, or new science opportunities. So I think there's a lot of potential still to create and that change, and we need to support the young to do that. But the young also need to kind of grasp those opportunities and not give up, not lose hope with all the doom and gloom that the scientists predict. I think there's still room to do things differently.
We are almost coming to end. Would you like to share anything else to the regional audience, and especially from the audience in Nepal, about your work experience and Ishimor sitting here in Kathmandu? Do you have anything else to share?
So, we've just personally, we love living here. We've been in many different parts of the region, but what I've found is that in this part of the region, I say this quite often, that people here are so friendly, so trusting, so accommodating, and so it's very easy to feel at home here as a obviously non-Nepali. So we've felt very welcomed here, and safe. Because there's some parts, even in London, I'm saying in London I don't feel as safe as I feel here, because my home is actually London. And perhaps the other message I would like to send, I think particularly to women, is don't give up. It's really important to have women in any level of profession, but also, as you mentioned earlier, in leadership. that it's really important to just keep going and to believe in yourself, and also to the younger generation, and go grab those innovations and those innovative opportunities and creative potential, and use that creative potential that your young mind has the potential to deliver on.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable time to join with us. It was my great pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for providing your time to Barakhari Media and this program.
Thank you.